The cabin shuddered with a loud bang, the cold air rushed in, and the oxygen mask dropped down. The 117 terrified passengers were staring at a 5-foot hole that ruptured their Boeing 737-300. One of them sent a text to his wife, saying, "Plane is going down, I love you." It started as a regular flight from Phoenix to Sacramento on April 1, 2011. Takeoff and initial climb-out went as usual. But as the plane approached its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, one of the ceiling panels fell down. A couple of seconds later, the captain informed everyone that the cabin had lost pressurization and instructed passengers to put on their oxygen masks. The sound of rushing wind grew louder. The captain quickly declared an emergency to air traffic control and was granted permission for an emergency descent. The pilots brought the aircraft down to 11,000 feet, where the air pressure was high enough to keep enough oxygen in the body tissues. Soon after, flight attendants reported an injury and a 2-foot hole in the fuselage. The pilots then requested to descend further to 9,000 feet. Ground control directed them to the nearest airport capable of handling a 737. It was Yuma International Airport. One of the flight attendants rushed to make an interphone call to the pilots or a PA announcement instead of immediately putting on his oxygen mask, so he lost consciousness, fell, and broke his nose. Other than that, there were luckily no injuries or major damage. The plane landed successfully, and all the passengers survived. As it turned out later, it all happened because one of the joints failed much earlier than Boeing's engineers expected. Another plane that got into serious trouble was carrying 440 passengers and 29 crew members, 5 of whom were pilots. The flight was going from London to Sydney with a stopover in Singapore. It completed the first leg of the journey without a problem, took on fuel, more passengers, and a new crew to carry on to Australia. It took off and moved southeast across the strait toward Indonesia, passing over the densely populated island of Batam. After 4 minutes in the air, right after passing an altitude of 7,000 feet, one of the engines failed. Fragments of a turbine disc were tearing through its wings and fuselage in multiple places. The Big Bang severely damaged every critical system on board, including the flight controls, fuel tanks, hydraulics, and pneumatics. With a flood of failure warnings and an aircraft in unknown condition, the flight crew had to quickly assess the situation and make the right decisions to bring the massive jet down safely. They also had to deal with malfunctioning landing gear, a loss of braking power, and an engine that refused to shut down. Against all odds, they managed to land the plane flawlessly. All 469 passengers and crew walked away without a single injury. As it turned out later, an oil pipe in one of the engines had walls that were slightly too thin, and it led to all this. On May 24, 1988, TACA International Flight 110 took off from Belize City, heading to New Orleans with 38 passengers and 7 crew members aboard. The aircraft was new and everything was going smoothly until the plane approached New Orleans and encountered severe thunderstorms. The pilots tried their best to navigate through the storm, but as they descended through thick clouds at 16,500 feet, both engines suddenly lost power. The plane was gliding toward the ground through extreme rain and hail with no thrust. The pilots tried to restart the engines using airflow, but even when they turned them back on, they didn't produce enough of it to reach the airport. The pilots realized they wouldn't make it to New Orleans International Airport, so they declared an emergency and considered a water landing in the Louisiana wetlands. Air traffic controllers suggested an alternate airport, but the plane didn't have enough altitude or speed to reach it. But then the first officer noticed a grassy levee that could work as a runway. The captain quickly changed course and managed to do the impossible and landed the plane on the narrow strip of grass. It suffered minimal damage, and every passenger and crew member walked away unharmed. On October 16, 1956, Pan Am Flight 6 was on the final leg of an around-the-world journey when it took off from Honolulu, Hawaii for San Francisco. Everything seemed normal on the 4-engine propeller-driven aircraft until about 1:20 a.m., when the number 1 engine began to malfunction. The first officer tried to reduce power and lower the flaps to slow the plane down. It was impossible because the propeller continued to windmill and created extra drag. The crew was struggling to keep control of the plane. But then, the number 4 engine also started failing. Soon it began backfiring, so they had to shut it down completely. Now running on just 2 engines, the plane couldn't maintain speed or altitude. They did some math and figured they didn't have enough fuel to reach San Francisco or return to Honolulu. That's when the captain radioed an emergency call. He knew that it would be too dangerous to try a water landing in the dark, so the captain decided to keep the plane in the air until dawn. He guided the aircraft toward a Coast Guard cutter stationed in the Pacific. When it was above the ship, the plane circled at 2,000 feet, then climbed up again to burn extra fuel and make it lighter. The captain asked passengers sitting in the back and near the engines to move forward. As dawn broke and waves started rising, he knew it was time. The crew made the final approach. The plane's tail snapped off upon impact and the nose dipped underwater. But thanks to their careful planning and the swift response of rescue boats, every passenger and crew member was safely rescued before the aircraft sank. Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Dallas Love Field on April 17, 2018, was carrying 144 passengers and 5 crew members. At 32,000 feet, the left engine suddenly blew up and its pieces were flying around. The wing and fuselage were damaged and shattered a window in row 14. This caused rapid decompression. The pilots immediately began an emergency descent and changed course toward Philadelphia International Airport. The plane tilted hard to the left. Alarms started going off. The pilots put on their oxygen masks and fought to regain control. But even after getting it back on track, the damage made it incredibly difficult to fly. When the captain found out one of the passengers needed immediate medical help, she tried to speed things up and managed to land safely in Philadelphia. Sadly, even that and all the efforts of the flight attendants didn't help, and the passenger who was sitting in row 14 passed away. But thanks to the quick thinking and skills of the pilot and flight attendants, a much bigger disaster was prevented. Air Transat Flight 236 was cruising from Canada to Portugal when 3 hours and 46 minutes into the journey, a fuel leak developed in the right engine. The pilots didn't realize it at first. They thought faulty sensors were giving them incorrect readings. For over an hour, they continued flying as normal, until they realized something was seriously off and diverted to the Azores for an emergency landing. By then, it was almost too late. The right engine failed when they still had over 170 miles to go. 75 miles out, the left engine also gave out, so the plane was completely powerless at 34,500 feet. The crew warned air traffic control that they might have to ditch into the dark and rough waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The impact could have shattered the plane, and the people on board would have minimal chances to survive. The pilots didn't give up and managed to glide nearly 75 miles and safely touch down. The moment the wheels hit the runway, the crew immediately started an emergency evacuation. Everyone on board survived, and they set a world record. The flight, later nicknamed the Azores Glider, became the longest passenger aircraft glide without engines ever recorded. Wow! It only takes a moment for a routine flight to turn into a gripping survival story. In a world where a wrong button or an unexpected gust of wind can lead to a disaster, adhering to safety rules is crucial for everyone, from buckling seatbelts to raising window shades during landing. We got all these rules learning from our mistakes. Stay tuned to find out more. A flight had a crazy mid-air moment in 1993 when the pilot accidentally deployed the wing slats, the part on the leading edge of the wing. Now, the weather was fine, passengers were relaxed, everyone was doing what they wanted. Suddenly, they felt an unexpected jolt. Instantly, the autopilot disengaged. The captain started wrestling with the controls. The plane became wonky, pitching and rolling dramatically, resulting in a rapid descent of 5,000 feet. The vibration threw the cabin into total chaos, with passengers screaming in fear. The slats were only to be used during takeoffs and landings, not in midair. It was China Eastern Airlines Flight 583 cruising over the Pacific on its way from Shanghai to Los Angeles. The pilot declared an emergency and directed the plane to an Air Force base in Alaska. Out of the 255 people on board, 60 ended up in a hospital, and sadly 2 didn't make it. The pilot made some quick moves to stabilize the aircraft, but the injuries happened because folks weren't buckled in. They reckoned that the slats deployed because of the design of the control handle. The company was to blame for that. They produced it in such a way that the handle could accidentally get jiggled while cruising. Luckily, the crew was trained, and the airliner itself was fine, except for the messed-up cabin. The aftermath of this incident was costly, requiring about $1.5 million to repair the damage. When the plane started to lose altitude, overhead lockers burst open, and the safety video played 3 times for an eerie touch. Once the aircraft steadied, flight attendants jumped into action, providing first aid, leaving empty kits scattered in the cabin. It turned out that the poorly designed slat control handle had caused 11 similar incidents before. The captain probably nudged it accidentally while fixing the speed controls. The lack of pilot training on high-altitude issues and the stall warning system made things worse. If the passengers had kept their seatbelts on, injuries would have been way less severe. This has been the case during many other accidents. You probably know this airplane announcement. Even when the seatbelt sign is off, buckle up when you're seated. Experts say it's a good call. While flying is safe, keeping that seatbelt on is smart because you might hit unexpected turbulence. It's about keeping you secure during that bumpy, jarring time, especially that sneaky one during stormy weather. Sarah Wilson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, thinks the seatbelt sign should be turned on throughout the entire journey. Predicting turbulence is like trying to guess the weather. It's not 100% accurate. Turbulence can happen anywhere. Aircraft are tough. They can handle really bad turbulence. The real risk is getting injured during turbulence, not planes falling apart. It's rare, but accidents still happen. In a dramatic episode in 2016, a pilot pulled off a superhero move, saving 439 lives. He was getting ready for takeoff in Shanghai. All of a sudden, another plane showed up on the runway in front of him. Reacting with lightning-fast speed, the pilot swiftly elevated his plane, narrowly avoiding a disaster. The pilot was awarded $360,000 for his remarkable skills. He missed the other plane by less than 67 feet, about the length of a semi-trailer truck. It turned out that the air traffic controllers and the landing crew had mixed things up. 2 controllers lost their licenses, and 13 others got in trouble. They say this incident was like a throwback to the Tenerife airport collision in 1977. Back then, 2 jumbo aircraft collided on a foggy runway. They didn't get lucky that time. The incident was a total disaster. Certain accidents in aviation history prevented others. With each crash, something crucial is upgraded. In 1956, 2 planes collided over the Grand Canyon, resulting in the tragic loss of 128 lives on board. This accident kick-started a $250 million air traffic control system enhancement. The Federal Aviation Agency also appeared in 1958 to keep an eye on air safety. Then in 1986, a private plane accidentally entered the Los Angeles control area, colliding with another aircraft. This tragedy took 86 people's lives. In response, collision avoidance systems were introduced. In 1978, United Flight 173 faced a landing gear problem. This led to a crash that claimed 10 lives. This incident triggered a transformation in cockpit training, introducing cockpit resource management. This management method shifted away from the traditional captain-centric approach to emphasizing teamwork and communication among the crew. Another upgrade was about averting in-flight emergencies. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 797 had smoke in the rear lavatory, which led to an accident that took 23 lives. The FAA responded by requiring smoke detectors and automatic fire extinguishers in aircraft lavatories. Post-1998, planes got retrofitted with fire-blocking seat cushions and floor lighting, with newer ones adopting flame-resistant materials. Winds can be dangerous in certain circumstances. The crash of Delta Flight 191 in 1985 brought attention to the dangers of wind shear. Research efforts by NASA and the FAA led to the development of forward-looking radar wind shear detectors. By the mid-90s, these became standard on airliners. The number of wind shear-related accidents has reduced significantly since then. In 1985, United Airlines Flight 232 faced a nightmare when the DC-10's engine failure left it virtually uncontrollable. Pilot Alfred Haynes landed the plane at a nearby airport, but the subsequent fire was terrifying. 185 passengers survived the catastrophe. The root cause of the incident was a crack in the fan disc, which occurred during the manufacturing of the titanium alloy. This incident prompted the FAA to modify the hydraulic system, implement redundant safety systems in future aircraft, and revolutionize engine inspection protocols. In 1988, a big chunk of an Aloha flight's fuselage ripped off in mid-flight. In an instant, the cabin was torn open, leaving the passengers exposed to the open sky. Despite the chaos, the pilots managed a safe landing, with only one fatality. The NTSB found that corrosion and fatigue damage, which had accumulated over 89,000 flight cycles, had caused this accident. The plane had been used for short-hop pressurized flights between the Hawaiian Islands. Shortly after, the agency initiated the National Aging Aircraft Research Program in 1991. This program tightened inspection and maintenance standards, especially for high-use and high-cycle planes. About 80% of mishaps happen in the first 3 minutes after takeoff or the last 8 minutes before landing. Keep your eyes peeled during these times, and your survival chances will go up. Now, don't let that freak you out. The odds of actually getting into a plane crash are like 1 in 11 million. That's the same possibility as being struck by lightning in a given year in the United States. Planes, on the other hand, often get struck by lightning, but they're built to handle it. Each plane probably gets zapped about once every year or every 3,000 hours it's up in the sky. But there hasn't been a lightning-related accident since 1967. Engineers have ensured that when a plane gets hit, the lightning just zips right through it and out, without really messing up anything inside. Let's delve into the fascinating mechanics of how planes stay airborne. The wings are important, but it's not just about them. There are 4 forces at play: lift, thrust, drag, and weight. The little tails on the ends of wings are called winglets, and they help reduce air swirls, making the aircraft slicker and faster. There's a reason why lights dim when a plane lands at night. It prepares everyone for a quick evacuation, helping the eyes adjust to the dark should the landing go awry. You're in a bright room filled with obstacles, and suddenly the lights go out and you're asked to dash for the exit. Tricky. Flight attendants also ask you to raise those window shades during landing. In case of an emergency, they want you to be able to see what's outside and figure out if one side of the plane is better for a quick escape. If you're wondering where the safest spot in an airliner is, it's in the back. According to research conducted by Popular Mechanics, spanning from 1971 to 2005, sitting in the back gives you a 40% better shot at making it through an accident. Almost as importantly, you're closer to the restrooms.
So, how many correct answers did you have? Tell me in the comments below. Me? 8. Duh.
If you look up a flight tracker map of the world, you can notice one interesting thing. Across the North Atlantic, the screen glows with thousands of planes flying between North America and Europe. But if you shift your gaze down toward the South Atlantic, there's almost nothing. Just a handful of lonely planes dot the screen. So why is it that one half of the Atlantic is as packed as a shopping mall on Black Friday, and the other is as deserted as a forgotten parking lot? The answer isn't just about distance or geography. It's a mix of history, economics, culture, and even how our imaginations of connection were built in the first place. For starters, the way flight networks evolved wasn't a natural process. No one built Africa's transport systems to connect Africans with South Americans across the ocean. They designed them like spokes on a wheel, all pointing toward Europe. Ports, railways, airports, everything was meant to ship goods, labor, and wealth northward, not sideways across the Atlantic. That means even after the Age of Independence, most of the air routes out of Africa led to Paris, London, Lisbon, or Brussels, not Rio de Janeiro or Buenos Aires. South America followed a similar script and built stronger ties with Europe and the United States than with Africa. The result? The South Atlantic never really got the chance to become an air superhighway in the first place. Then, whether we like it or not, airlines follow money like bees follow honey. Planes just don't go anywhere. They go where demand exists. The North Atlantic sits between two of the richest, most interconnected economies in the world, Europe and North America. Billions in trade, finance, tech, education, and migration flow back and forth across this stretch every single day. Engineers shuttle between Silicon Valley and London. Students fill planes between Boston and Paris. Tourists flood in both directions. That translates to around 500 flights every day between the US and Western Europe alone, and over 10,000 flights a week between North America and Europe. Meanwhile, the South Atlantic connects two regions that are dynamic in their own right, but don't trade as intensely with each other. Africa ships raw materials, mainly to Europe and Asia, and South America's main trade partners are North America, Europe, and China. The two continents don't really need each other on a day-to-day basis, which means there's not much demand to fill a fleet of airplanes. Migration patterns add to the deal. When people move, airlines follow, because where families stretch, flights connect. In the North Atlantic, you've got centuries of migration weaving tight family ties across the ocean. There are Irish families in Boston, Italians in New York, Germans in Chicago, and many other examples. Add in business expats, international students, and professionals, and suddenly there's an endless need for flights back and forth. The South Atlantic, by contrast, doesn't have the same migration history. Sure, the African diaspora in Brazil is massive, but much of that goes back centuries, so there's not so much modern voluntary migration that keeps up steady traffic today. In the modern era, doctors, engineers, and students from both Africa and South America usually set their sights on the US, Canada, or Europe, rather than hopping across to each other's continent. Without those migration-driven visiting relatives or returning students, the passenger base just doesn't exist. Tourism is another missing piece. Americans cross the Atlantic to sip espresso in Rome or visit London's museums, and Europeans head west to hit Disney World or road trip across Route 66. It's an entire industry with cheap flights and cultural ties. In contrast, South America and Africa don't have the same setup. A Brazilian tourist doesn't usually dream of heading to Ghana for vacation, just like a Kenyan backpacker isn't exactly booking a weekend in Sao Paulo. Language divides, cultural distance, and weaker tourism marketing all make it less appealing. Plus, costs are higher and flight options are scarce, so why would someone bother? Without a steady stream of leisure travelers, airlines aren't crazy about carving out new routes across the South Atlantic. Now, geography adds its own dose of irony. On paper, Africa and South America aren't that far apart. At their closest points, Brazil to West Africa, is actually shorter than some North Atlantic routes. But the cities that generate passengers are not sitting neatly on those edges. Major hubs, such as Sao Paulo or Buenos Aires, are deeper into South America. On the African side, hubs like Johannesburg and Nairobi are hundreds or even thousands of miles from the coast. That means a direct Sao Paulo-Johannesburg flight isn't just crossing an ocean. It's crossing an ocean plus a huge chunk of land on the African side. That jacks up the distance and the cost, and makes it harder to fill planes profitably. So when you compare that to New York-London or Paris-Toronto, you see why more people choose these shorter direct hops between economic capitals. Now even the weather throws in obstacles. The North Atlantic has a neat trick up its sleeve, the jet stream. These faster-moving air currents help push planes across the ocean and shave hours off flights and save tons of fuel. The South Atlantic is not so lucky in this way. It doesn't have a similar jet stream pattern running neatly across its width, so flights burn more fuel and take longer without getting the same free ride. Plus, there are fewer alternate airports along the way in case of emergencies. Modern planes can cross the ocean easily, but still, safety matters. The North Atlantic is dotted with islands like Iceland, Greenland, the Azores, and Bermuda, which double as emergency stopovers. They are the backup options if something goes wrong. But the South Atlantic, outside of a few remote islands like Ascension or St. Helena, is a vast stretch of water with nowhere to land in a pinch. It does make things more complicated and routes less attractive when you weigh against potential costs and risks. Meanwhile, infrastructure plays its part too. Europe and North America have some of the busiest, best-connected airports in the world. They get constantly upgraded to handle huge flows of passengers and cargo. By contrast, many airports in Africa and South America are improving, but they still don't have the same connectivity and can't accept the same number of passengers. Routes rely heavily on big hubs to feed passengers in and out, and if those hubs aren't strong enough, the routes struggle. Alliances sneak in as well. It's not just demand that shapes airline networks. There are also agreements. I mean, who's allowed to fly where and with which partners. Open skies agreements and powerful alliances like oneworld, Star Alliance, and SkyTeam rule the North Atlantic. They coordinate routes, schedules, and ticketing to make flights seamless. South America and Africa still don't share that level of coordination. Now finally, it comes down to psychology as much as economics. Flying is about more than just getting from point A to point B. It's also where people feel connected. The North Atlantic wins from centuries of cultural intertwining – music, movies, shared history, business, and family. The South Atlantic feels worlds apart in the global imagination. When someone from Sao Paulo dreams of going abroad, they will most likely picture New York, but still not Luanda or Dakar. And when someone in Lagos dreams of foreign travel, they will more likely imagine London, not Buenos Aires. There are some parts of the world that are practically off the radar when it comes to air traffic. The polar regions, like the Arctic and Antarctica, have almost no commercial flights. Planes mostly stick to research stations or very specific northern routes. Out in the Pacific, especially the South Pacific, between some islands in French Polynesia, flights are also rare and not always seem logical. Even in South America, commercial air travel mostly skips the Amazon rainforest regions of Brazil and Peru. Maybe it'll change in the future, but so far, the North Atlantic is like a busy interstate highway, and these southern regions are more like calm back roads.
Hey, look at this stunning futuristic interior! It's a long studio room with a low ceiling, white walls, and windows overlooking the forest. And there's also a large panoramic window in the corner. You can easily invite hundreds of guests here, and they will all be impressed. So what, would you like to buy or rent this spot? Oh, there's another minor nuance. This house is an airplane. Unfortunately, you can only fly somewhere on it if you invest a couple of $1 million for repairs, but it's possible to live here. A resident of Oregon, Bruce Campbell, created this place. He turned a giant Boeing 727 into his home, where he spends about 6 months every year. Bruce installed 2 bathrooms and a shower, made a kitchen, and equipped this place with electricity. It has everything you need for a comfortable stay. But the most incredible thing is that you can create precisely the same house. To understand how to do this, let's look at Bruce's story. As a teenager, he was watching TV when he saw a report of an aircraft boneyard. These iron birds amazed him and inspired him to create a new home. Growing up, Bruce began to study electrical engineering and always remembered his teenage dream. In the 70s, he bought 10 acres of land in the woods near the town of Hillsboro, Oregon. This area is approximately equal to 8 football fields. After that, he began to look for a plane. In 1999, he hired a rescue company to help him find a Boeing. Soon, they found a 200-seat passenger aircraft in Greece. Since the plane was already out of order and no one would fly it, Bruce bought it for little money. It was just $100,000. The amount is small, considering that a new Boeing costs about $100 million. Airport staff removed the engine and fuel from the plane. disassembled it, and sent it to Oregon. After the logistics problems were solved and the plane ended up in the woods, Bruce began to turn it into a house. The repair work lasted several years. When everything was ready, the media found out about Bruce and made him a celebrity. He showed that even such gigantic things as an airplane could be recycled. Bruce invites anyone to his house to show that airplanes can be used for cheap housing. The advantages of such a house are that the airplane's outer layer can protect from cold, moisture, wind, and sun. Every year in the US, several hundred aircraft break down. People transport them to the aircraft boneyard, where these planes are waiting for repairs or turning into scrap metal. And many of them are in good condition. Another unusual house is located in Tokyo, Japan. It's definitely not your choice if you go to relax alone or think that home is a place where no one can bother you. Welcome to the transparent house. It looks pretty stylish. There are huge panoramic windows without curtains and no walls and doors between the rooms. There are a bunch of large shelves and ladders inside. You can climb, jump, and hang here. The height of the house is 3 floors. It looks like a modern urban tree house. This place is open to everyone. And now, take a look at the most fantastic tree house. Can you see it? No? No wonder. This house is almost invisible in the forest because of its mirrored surface. It's called Mirror Tree House and is located in Sweden. At night with the lights off, this small building completely merges with nature. Now turn on the lights in the windows and take a closer look. This is a stylish and modern building where anyone can spend the night. You need to pay for it though because it's a hotel. Here's another tree house. More precisely, it's a huge building built on several trees. It's called Minister's Tree House and is located in Crossville, Tennessee. It's considered to be the biggest treehouse in the world. It's built from recycled wood. It occupies almost 5 floors in height and has several rooms. If elves lived in the forest, then this house would be their bank or the administration of the woods. Let's get down from the trees to the ground, more precisely, under the ground. It's not even a house, but a small town. And every building here is pretty unusual. You won't see this town from the outside. All houses, cafes, post offices, and other buildings are located in the pits from which pipes protrude, releasing steam. Welcome to Coober Pedy, Australia. Enter any house and see that there is ground instead of the usual walls and wallpaper. Such unusual architecture is because this place is the world's largest reserve of opal. Most of these minerals, which are sold all over the world, are mined in this city. Opal was first found in these lands in 1915. Since then, people have been coming here to search for precious stones. There are no mining companies here because it's impossible to determine large deposits of opal with the help of technology. Therefore, people mine it manually with picks and shovels. This work is quite long and difficult. So, the town residents rent a place where they dig and build a house. Spread your arms in different directions. That's the width of our next house. The distance from one wall to the other is less than the length of your body. It looks tiny, but people are happy to live here. Welcome to the Current House. The narrowest house in the world is located in Poland. On the streets of Warsaw, you will easily notice it. It's like it's stuck between 2 buildings. Everything is pretty cute and stylish inside. The white interior adds a feeling of extra space. The Current House serves as a transit point for travel writers. If you're working on a book, this place will be a great source of inspiration for you. This house looks like something from another planet. It's called Robert Bruno's Steel House. It stands on 4 legs, has a strangely shaped window, and is made of metal. This strange house is located in Ransom Canyon, Texas. This is the creation of the sculptor Robert Bruno. He built it from the 70s until 2008. He used about 150 tons of blackened steel and made every detail by hand. Unfortunately, the sculptor passed away before he could complete his masterpiece. There's a toilet house in South Korea, close to Seoul. This big building looks like a giant toilet bowl. It's made of steel, white concrete, and glass. The purpose of this house is to promote the hygiene and sanitation of toilets. Many diseases are spread because of poor cleaning. Inside the toilet, you will find 2 guest rooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bathrooms. And to rent the whole building, you need to pay about $50,000. Looking at this house in one of the alleys of London, it may seem to you that the building is about to fall apart. The house was built in the 16th century and originally didn't look like this. But in 1687, the city council ordered the demolition of the building to free space for something else. The house was almost destroyed, but its owner sued the city council. He won the case and the council was obliged to restore the house. But they did it in a hurry, using cheap materials. For many years, the wood has been bending and the house has got such an unusual shape. Let's end our realtor's journey with this fun house. People who love skateboarding will be delighted to visit this place. Welcome to Skateboard House Malibu, California. You don't leave your home to start riding. The whole house has a circular curved shape and there's no corners in it. There are beds and tables here, which you can also use for tricks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pilot of your plane speaking. Please fasten your seatbelts and stay calm. Don't worry, everything's fine. We're just falling! Ah! Okay, don't panic. Yes, we're falling, but the landing is gonna be great. And do you know why?
Because this is a video about the most incredible landings with happy endings. So, imagine this situation. You're in a giant passenger Boeing. The plane is flying from Montreal to Edmonton at an altitude of tens of thousands of feet. Weather is good. There's no turbulence. But then, you notice a strange silence. You don't understand what's happening. Exactly. The sound of engines is gone. And do you know why? Because they stopped working right in the air. The plane has run out of fuel. It'll take you a couple of minutes to get to the nearest gas station, if you fly straight down. It's a real accident that happened on July 23, 1983. That flight got nicknamed the Gimli Glider. During the fueling of the aircraft, the crew confused the measurements. They thought they were pouring American gallons, when it was actually liters. The pilots realized the mistake when they were already in the sky when the fuel had run out. They didn't panic and put the aircraft into the optimal mode to increase its flight range. One of them knew that the Gimli Air Force Base was nearby. There was a small runway there. At that moment, it was filled with some garbage and carts. The pilot contacted the base and warned them about the emergency landing. The employees of the base cleared the runway in a matter of minutes. The plane began to land very smoothly. The pilots controlled the aircraft by using its wings. They needed the last drops of fuel to brake with the help of turbines. When the plane touched down, the front landing gear broke. The landing was tough. The whole plane was shaking, and the passengers were terrified. But everything ended well. No one got hurt. On November 1st, 2011, a Polish Airlines 767 passenger plane was flying from the USA to Warsaw. 30 minutes after taking off, the pilots suddenly realized the landing gear didn't work. They warned the passengers about it. The wheels didn't come out because of some hydraulic error. Pilots remained calm and continued the flight. They almost reached the final destination and made several more attempts to deploy the landing gear. Nothing worked. They realized they would have to make a hard landing. When any airplane lands at this speed without wheels, it releases a lot of sparks, and its body heats up because of friction with the ground. In this case, the chance of a fuel tank fire is high. That's why the pilots had to circle around the airport for about an hour to burn fuel. Then, when the tank was almost empty, They started landing without the landing gear. There were sparks, metal grinding against the runway, the cabin shaking. The lower part of the fuselage turned red because of the high temperature. After sliding for a while, the plane stopped. About 231 people on board were rescued, thanks to the pilot's professionalism. Probably one of the most famous emergency landings occurred on the Hudson River on January 15, 2009. Pilot Chesley Sullenberger became a hero that day. The plane he was flying collided with a flock of geese during its departure from New York. The engines were out of order. There was only icy water under the aircraft and almost no chance of salvation. Even now, experts say that the risk of crashing the plane was very high, but experienced Chesley Sullenberger knew what to do. He did his best to calm down, focused on his work, calculated the exact angle at which the plane needed to touch the water, and successfully landed the aircraft. If he had made the slightest mistake, the plane would have lost its wings and drowned almost immediately. Chesley Sullenberger saved the lives of 155 people and became a celebrity. There was one dangerous situation in the sky on June 10, 1990. Not for passengers, but for the pilot. Flight 5390 British Airways took off from England and headed for Spain. It was gaining altitude, and the flight attendants started serving food to the passengers. At that moment, the pilots heard some noise. Condensate began to fill the cabin. Then, the glass on the side of the captain flew out of the window frame. He was pulled halfway out of the cabin because of decompression. His knees got stuck in the control panel next to his seat. The first officer grabbed him tightly by the belt. The temperatures were extremely low, and an incredibly strong wind was blowing outside. The plane began to descend, gaining speed. The autopilot shut down. The flight attendants grabbed the captain so that the co-pilot could operate the controls with both hands. The oxygen level was decreasing, so he began an emergency landing. The captain was outside the plane for about 20 minutes, and despite the extreme conditions, he survived. The plane landed successfully. The captain was taken to the hospital, and the glass was replaced. Further investigation revealed that the window had flown out because the bolts used there had been wrong. A plane runs out of gasoline. The engines stall. An aircraft crashes into a flock of birds. That's all pretty scary stuff. But what if a plane broke in half? This really happened in April 2022. A DHL Boeing 757-200 cargo plane was picking up speed on the runway. It was going to fly to Guatemala. The aircraft took off, and the pilots noticed some malfunction in the hydraulic system. They didn't fly far away, so they asked the dispatchers to allow them to land. The plane turned around and began to descend, and at that moment, its tail just broke off. The plane ran off the runway. Its hull was hot, but firefighters poured anti-fire foam on it just in time. What caused such an accident is unknown. The company launched an internal investigation. The next hard landing occurred in the 40s. The pilot and 2 crew members were flying over Papua New Guinea. Visibility was poor because of fog and rain. But, according to the pilot's calculations, they were flying above a wheat field. He began to lower the plane. The clouds cleared, and he saw not a field, but a swampy area. They had no choice but to make a hard landing. It was a success, kind of. All 3 crew members survived, but the plane got bogged down in a swamp. It was impossible to take off, so the crew went to look for the nearest settlement. For 2 days, they were walking through the swamps, sharp tall grass, and hordes of mosquitoes. Exhausted, they reached dry land and met one of the locals. They helped the crew, took them to the village, and provided medical help. The plane was left to rot in the swamp, forgotten. It stayed there for about 30 years. Its whole body got covered with grass, mud, and moss. And the cabin was moldy. The locals loved to climb inside and play with it. Then, in the 70s, some tourists from Austria accidentally found the aircraft. They took a photo of the plane and published it in the local newspaper. It attracted the attention of many photographers and travelers from all over the world. They called the plane the Swamp Ghost. Many tourists visited it and took parts of the plane as souvenirs. In 2016, one American traveler pulled it out of the swamp and moved it to his home. Lightning is never a triangle, straight line, or circle. It has a zigzag shape. Lightning is an electric current, like those you have in your house, except this one is much more powerful. It always takes the path of least resistance. There are lots of things in the air, like dust particles, gases, and other substances, so it's uneven and irregular. Let's say you have a mound of sand. When you pour water, it won't flow downward in a straight line, but in specific patterns, seeking the best way through the sand. The same happens with lightning. Antarctica has icebergs that look like giant ocean waves frozen in motion. Despite their appearance, these formations are created over long periods of time. The ice got lifted, compacted, and shaped by the wind and other elements, accidentally taking the wave shape in the end. Blood Falls is a glacier in Antarctica that pours out some sort of red liquid that looks like blood. Scientists say it happens because there's a salty lake with a large iron content under the glacier. Salt water freezes at a lower point than fresh water, so it melts the ice above, letting the river flow. This is the coldest glacier on our planet, which is why the water can constantly flow without melting it. And the red color is because of the iron in the water. Antarctica is the only continent where you can't find reptiles. They're cold-blooded, which means they depend on heat from their environment to keep their bodies warm and can't survive in cold, icy regions such as Antarctica. Penguins can relax. No snakes or crocodiles to bother them there. Only a quarter of the Sahara territory is sand. There are mountains and oases, but most of the desert is covered in gravel. And it's not the biggest desert on Earth. Antarctica is. Just like people, trees also stop growing at a certain age. Scientists think this could be because when a tree gets old and reaches a certain height, it has trouble pulling water from the soil and pumping it all the way to the top because of gravity. Some trees, like the baobab, start growing out instead of up when they get to their full height. The baobab expands up to 0.4 inches every year. Australia is atop of one of the world's fastest moving tectonic plates. It moves 2.5 inches northward every year, which is about the rate our fingernails and hair grow. If you feel like trying to find something to watch on TV is just wasting your life, studies agree. The average person spends 1.3 years flipping between channels and trying to find something worthy of their attention. You can see a rainbow at night, too. It's a rare phenomenon called a lunar rainbow, or moonbow, and it appears when moonlight is reflected and dispersed through moisture and water droplets in the atmosphere. Lunar rainbows mostly occur in areas with high rainfall, or even near waterfalls surrounded by mist. When you crack an egg on land, it can turn into a mess, but 60 feet under the ocean, there's 2.8 times the atmospheric pressure on the egg, which is why it holds together like there's an invisible shell, and looks like some sort of weird jellyfish. Stars don't actually twinkle. Their light is constant and steady, but when it interferes with Earth's atmosphere, it bumps and bounces through the air, which bends the light. Different layers of air are constantly moving, which changes the bending of the light too, so it looks like twinkling. Hudson Bay, Canada is the area where gravity is lower than in other parts of our planet. It's not like people there are free-floating like in space, but it may feel like some sort of a natural geographical diet. Lower gravity leads to less density, so you'd weigh less there than anywhere else. Gravity depends on the density of the Earth, so it's uneven. When the last ice age hit, Hudson Bay was covered by a 2-mile-thick glacier. It was heavy, so it kept pushing down on the rock underneath it. Over 20,000 years ago, the glaciers began to melt, but the Bay region was left deformed due to heavy ice that used to be there. The only sport someone played on the moon was golf. In 1971, an astronaut went to the moon and hit 2 golf balls, sending them flying through the low-gravity atmosphere on the lunar surface. The Great Wall of China is 5,000 miles long. so it would take you about 18 months to walk its length. Contrary to popular belief, you can't see it from space with your bare eyes. Lobsters are not biologically immortal. They age through time, but also produce a special enzyme that's in charge of repairing their cells. It also replicates their DNA indefinitely, so they can live for a very, very long time. If you went to the deepest part of the ocean, you'd feel an incredibly strong pressure, more than 8 tons per square inch, which is like having 50 jumbo jets lying on top of you. The Sun is the biggest object you can find in our solar system. While there are so many rocky planets, gas giants, asteroids, and dwarf planets, the Sun still makes up 99.8% of the total mass of our system. The Sun is in the most stable stage of its life cycle at the moment, but in around 5 billion years, it will run out of hydrogen, its fuel. We can see sunsets because the atmosphere of our planet acts like a prism. Science calls it scattering. There's more distance between us and the Sun at the time of sunset, meaning more particles and molecules are in the air. They scatter some of the short wavelength violet and blue light off in different directions. This process happens millions of times before the beam of sunlight gets to our eyes, and that's when we see some other colors of the spectrum, such as orange or yellow. Tsunamis can reach a speed of more than 500 miles per hour, which is as fast as a jet plane. They retain the energy, which means they can move across the ocean and almost not lose energy at all until they reach the shore. Octopuses are some of the most intelligent creatures in the sea. They navigate through mazes, solve problems, and have pretty good short-term memory. Scientists believe they're so smart because they live a pretty dynamic life. They move fast, hide in unpredictable places, expand across new habitats, move in unusual patterns, and let their tentacles into crevices for food. This is all challenging enough for their brain to develop all the time. The famous heads, known as Maui statues on Easter Island, have bodies too. They're just hidden beneath the surface. There are also 900 Maui statues on the island. Scientists discovered New Zealand is part of a larger landmass that lies under the water. 94% of the total land is under the surface. It's called Zealandia and is considered to be a microcontinent. Maybe it'll even be the 8th on the list.
An engine explodes during takeoff. The water injection system is switched off, and communication is lost. Now, this doomed plane faces the imminent threat of crashing into Athens or a hill. Will the captain be able to defy all odds and save over 400 lives on board? Stay tuned. It's 2 in the afternoon. A Boeing 747 starts rolling down the runway, picking up speed. Just as Captain Sifis Migadis lifts the nose of the aircraft, he's surprised by a loud bang. He has no idea what's just happened, but he's left with no options. The fully loaded plane is moving too fast to stop on the short runway space still left. The airplane begins its risky takeoff, and it's now heading straight for downtown Athens, which is absolutely crowded on a hot summer evening in August 9th, 1978. After the loud explosion, a flight attendant in the back takes the intercom and warns the crew about the catastrophic failure of engine number 3 located on the right side of the airplane. The flight attendant says, "I think we're screwed." And here's an honest, "Yeah, I know." The original plan of the Olympic Airways Flight 411 was a direct shot from Athens to New York. But now, this massive 370-ton jumbo jet simply doesn't have enough power to keep going up. The stress is through the roof. The flight is fully loaded with 18 crew members and 400 passengers, who are mostly US citizens returning from their Greek summer vacation. Little do they know that the pilot still has to face 4 major problems in a 93-second period to ensure everyone stays alive. The first issue has to do with water injection. You see, this Boeing has 4 engines. Engine number 3 has just exploded, and engine number 2 is operating with reduced power after maintenance. So the pilot needs the remaining engines to give their all to get this plane climbing. The thing is, pushing the engines to the max creates a ton of heat. So, Captain Migadis asks the onboard flight engineer to double-check if the cooling system is on, preventing the engines from getting too hot and maintaining a safe temperature. It's a bit tricky to explain what went wrong at this point, but experts think that in the heat of the moment, the flight engineer might have gotten a little mixed up. Instead of ensuring the water injection is on, he does the opposite and switches the system off just 9 seconds after takeoff. This mistake further reduces the power in the engines, limiting the plane's ability to climb by causing a loss of 4,500 pounds of thrust. So now, the plane finds itself in a seriously bad situation, barely cruising over the rooftops at below minimum speed. The second issue with this doomed aircraft involves the landing gear. The 55-year-old pilot had already had over 30 years of experience when he was assigned to command this flight. So he decides to make a bold move by telling his co-pilot to pull up the wheels at 35 feet above the runway. This move isn't just risky, it's straight up against Boeing rules in situations like this. Pilots usually have to wait until the aircraft gains a bit more altitude to pull up the wheels, because popping those landing gear doors open for 15 seconds adds more resistance against the plane's forward motion. In other words, it basically slows the plane down, and that's why the co-pilot hesitates for a second before agreeing to break the rule. Against all odds, the 411 flight stays in the air, but the problems are far from over. This leads us to the third issue. The plane is getting dangerously close to hitting one of the oldest capital cities in the world, Athens. The flight started from Ellinikon International Airport. This was the main airport for the Greek capital for decades, and it was known as one of the trickiest and riskiest airports in the world. Picture this: 2 short runways, side by side, squeezed between the Aegean Sea and large mountains. Even though there were 2 runways, they mostly used just one, the one pointing planes straight at the center of Athens. Because of that, pilots had to make an immediate left turn right after takeoff, changing the flight path over the sea. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't Migadi's just turn left already? Well, the speed of the 747 is way lower than it should be at this point. If he makes a turn, the plane might descend even more, upping the chances of crashing right into the city. So, the captain decides to keep climbing, following a straight path while he's figuring out Plan B. Do you remember that the airport is surrounded by mountains? Well, this is problem number 4. The pilot knows that in about a mile, the airplane will face a hill that's about 200 feet tall. As Migadi's watches Pawnee Hill getting closer and closer, he decides to give up a few knots of airspeed to gain the altitude he desperately needs to fly over the hill. Migadi's feels relief when he sees that his risky plan has worked. The airplane flies over the hill with only 9 feet to spare. Yet, the relief fades quickly. He still needs to come up with an emergency landing plan. Imagine the cockpit eerily silent. They don't have contact with the tower anymore. While the 2 pilots are doing everything they can to keep Flight 411 from crashing, the flight engineer is still focused on fixing the problems with the engines. The terrain gets lower after the plane flies over Pawnee Hill, so the captain decides to lower the nose of the plane to trade a bit of altitude for speed. But nothing happens. In fact, the airplane's speed just keeps dropping, and they're barely exceeding an altitude of 200 feet. The plane is so low that it's even taking down some television antennas. It's around the height of a 14-story building named the Inter-American Tower. The airplane gets so close to that building that some flight attendants can actually see people's faces inside. A happy ending seems unreal as the plane is approaching a catastrophic collision with Mount Aigaleo, which is over 1,500 feet high. But suddenly, the engines kick in with more power and the plane starts picking up speed. Some specialists believe the acceleration was due to the combination of 3 things. The wind shifted, the temperature outside dropped, and the water injection system kicked back in. And the good news is that with more power in the engines, the pilot successfully gains altitude. By 2:05, Migadi's managed to turn left, avoiding a collision with Mount Aigaleo. The plane is heading towards the ocean. It keeps flying for over 30 minutes to dump fuel. The idea is to make the aircraft lighter before landing, as it's loaded with 160 tons of fuel needed for the transatlantic flight. After that, the captain brings the aircraft back to the same runway from which they took off, and they land safely at Alinicon Airport. Everyone on board is safe, not a scratch on them, all thanks to this pilot who bravely broke the rules to save his crew and passengers. Now, picture the wild applause on the ground, and Migotti's daughters eagerly waiting for their father as he exits the plane. And it's no small feat, this pilot did the unthinkable. To put it in perspective, every Boeing simulation of this same flight ended in a crash. Migotti's impressive achievement led Olympic Airways to modify some of its procedures, and Boeing began to include a review of this case in its training curriculum. Now, you might be thinking that Migotti's was traumatized after this accident and never wanted to board an aircraft again. But nope. Remember, we're talking about a real hero. At 6 p.m. on that same day, Migotti's took his seat in the cockpit of a replacement Boeing 747 and flew 400 passengers over the Atlantic to New York. As for the aircraft, it stuck around with Olympic Airways for a couple of years until it joined Trans World Airlines in 1985. This 747 Boeing's career ended in 1997 after 24 years of service.
Hey, we all want to get from point A to point B in the quickest, most direct path possible. Agreed? Good. But if you ever wondered why there's no direct flight from your hometown to your destination, there's a reason. When deciding on a new route, airlines have smart analysts who decide what that route will be or if it'll even happen. They got two main questions to answer: how many people want to go there, and how much money are passengers willing to pay? Depending on those two factors, airlines can make new routes and drop existing ones. Distance means fuel, and fuel means money. If they're not selling enough tickets to enough passengers going that route, out it goes. So it's not only us passengers wanting to get from A to B the fastest way possible. The airline wants to make it as efficient as it can be too, because time is money. By the way, it's always bugged me why people don't want to fly from B to A. It's always A to B. Why? B's a nice place, but you wouldn't want to live there? I don't get it. Anyway, back to the script. Whenever you're going on a road trip, you probably plan your route. You pick the best possible roads, you check how many gas stations, stores, and rest stops will be on the way. Even if you don't do that, airlines certainly do, because flying is a lot more expensive than driving. Before a flight starts, the crew makes a flight plan. The plan is uploaded to the aircraft's computer and shows the whole route from one city to another. The plane will have to stick to it most of the time, even though there's actually a whole set of routing possibilities. Because it's good to have a plan B, C, and D when you're moving a large chunk of metal through the sky with hundreds of people on board, airlines have the main route and backups to use in case of weather conditions or other possible issues. So, the people and the airline want the plane to fly the least time possible. As we know, the shortest way from A to B is a straight line. But when you look at the flight map, it's anything but a straight line. It's more of a rainbow shape across the globe. Why is that? Because showing our 3D Earth on a 2D map tricks your eye. Your plane really is flying in a straight line. Proof? If you take a string and connect, say, LA and Tokyo, you'll see it's as straight as lines get. But compare your string to the lines of latitude running across your globe. There it is, that rainbow. If we look at a live flight tracker, we can see thousands of planes flying at the same time in the same route. I mean, the whole map is covered. Look at them all. Okay, now let's take for example the US and Europe. Planes from New York, Boston, Chicago, and plenty of other cities all fly to Germany, Spain, Greece, you name it. They're all in the same air at the same time and landing in Europe by morning. Turns out, the air highway is much busier than anyone thought. Imagine it happening on a highway on the ground. So much traffic every single day. But when you're up there in the sky looking out at the clouds, it feels like your plane is all alone. All these planes use pretty much the same route because it's faster and cheaper. So how is it that thousands of aircraft, all basically on the same road, don't fly into each other? Well, the difference between the road and the sky is that the road is flat. Up there, thousands of feet above the ground, the space is 3D. So air travel takes perfect advantage of that. But you still have to coordinate all that movement, of course. Air traffic is managed by dispatchers who watch for planes and make sure they don't get closer than 3 miles to each other. Something that helps them do that is flight level regulations. All westbound flights stay at even-numbered altitudes. 34,000, 36,000 feet, you get it. All eastbound flights are at odd-numbered altitudes. 35,000 and 37,000 feet. Meaning there's at least 1,000 feet between planes flying towards each other. Doesn't sound like much when we're talking altitudes of tens of thousands of feet, but that's about the height of the Empire State Building. Some parts of the air have extremely high traffic because so many planes fly there every minute. Whenever an aircraft enters one of these super busy zones, it must follow a very specific route. But even in not-so-crowded zones, there are still thousands of planes. To share the sky safely, each must follow their own route that even has a specific name. And they have plenty of help staying on the right path. There are devices on the ground called fixed navigational aids, or nav aids for short. They send radio signals in the sky that an aircraft can pick up on. You also have waypoints that are simply geographical points on Earth. They're loaded into the GPS systems, and an aircraft must follow them. An airplane's whole route is basically flying from one waypoint to another, all the way to the destination place. Now, let's go back to that global flight tracker. Something else you'll notice is that planes mostly avoid flying over the ocean and large bodies of water, the Pacific Ocean in particular. Yes, you see some here and there because people do have to get to Hawaii somehow. But in general, everyone's flying around the Pacific, not over it. That's because it's a route that's preferably avoided. Whenever there's a nice path above the ground an aircraft can follow instead, it'll go for the ground. But that doesn't make any sense because flights over water are smoother. Turbulence is caused from hot air rising from the ground. When there's no ground below you and just vast water, the source disappears and you get a less bumpy flight. Still, flying over land is safer. It just comes down to more possibilities for emergency landing on the ground rather than, well, in the middle of the ocean. And planes that take those transoceanic flights are usually the big kind with 4 engines. It'd just be too dangerous for the ones with only 2 engines. Just imagine an engine fails, and that plane would have to rely on the one other engine it has. If possible, just best avoid it. But big ones also prefer to have a safe place to land just in case. Now, show me an airport in the Pacific Ocean. Not many of them, huh? Hence, why everyone's flying around it. Another region that planes prefer to avoid is the Himalayas. Again, doesn't mean it never happens, just better not to. The Himalayan mountains are higher than 20,000 feet, with Mount Everest reaching 29,032 feet, just to be precise. Most planes fly at about 30,000 feet, and that's just way too close for comfort. Not to mention the winds are strong there, and mountains make it difficult to maneuver the aircraft. That, and there are almost no radar services in the Himalayas, so the pilot wouldn't be able to communicate with the ground. Also, an emergency landing is only possible on a flat surface. The Himalayan region is the exact opposite of that. Add to that, there's a risk of running out of oxygen in this already dangerous area. An airplane only has enough oxygen to last 20 minutes. Plenty of time for the pilot to lower to at least 10,000 feet to a safer altitude with more oxygen. But the Himalayas make that pretty much impossible because, well, mountains, poking up all over the place. You get the picture. Back to our flight tracker map. You'll also notice hardly any planes flying over the poles, except that one up in the Arctic. Hey, what are you doing there? Ah, Dubai, Seattle. Well, it's one of the very few. This route likely got a special approval, navigation system, and a unique set of preparations. The problem here is that the poles interfere with the navigation. Compasses there go berserk and are of no use. The Earth's North Pole has a very strong magnetic field that's constantly changing. The magnetic field moves, making true north different from what pilots see on their devices. If they're just a few degrees off course, it could end up costing them dearly over long distances. That's why very few planes actually fly over the Arctic. And forget about Antarctica, nobody's flying over it. Not that you're not allowed, it's just that almost 70% of Earth's land is in the Northern Hemisphere, and nearly 90% of the world population lives up there. Hey, the more you know.
You turn the ignition key and hear the whir of the propeller in front of the cockpit. It gets quicker and quicker until it's a blur, and the plane begins to move forward down the runway. You're a trainee pilot, and this is your first supervised flight in a light aircraft. The instructor gives you an enthusiastic nod, and you begin to fly the plane upwards. Once you're in the air, you begin to relax until you hear a loud bang. Suddenly, the engine gets very quiet, and the propeller slows to a stop. You're losing control of your plane, and with no way to maintain your speed, you're heading towards a crash landing. You've come too far to turn back, so the instructor quickly shouts instructions to you. For every 1,000 feet of lost altitude, a plane can glide for 1.5 miles. Light aircraft fly at low altitudes, so you're in a race against the clock to find a makeshift runway for your emergency landing. An enormous forest stretches out below you, but you can see a lake in the distance, so you ask the instructor whether you can land there. He urgently tells you not to. Hitting the water at this speed would badly damage the plane, and it would sink before you could get out. The plane gets closer and closer to the ground, and an explosive end. You pass the lake, and he tells you to land on the long stretch of road that runs through the forest. You need to find a stretch that's straight enough to land at speed and free of obstructions, like roadside trees. The plane is scarily close to the ground, but luckily, the forest begins to thin, and the road straightens out enough to try the landing. It's now or never, so you begin your preparations. You cut the speed to about 60 miles an hour and try to avoid the drivers below. You carefully dodge electricity lines and road signs as you hover a few feet above the ground. People begin to swerve out of the road in panic when they see the out-of-control plane. You fly into the air as your wheels bounce off the road. Your nerve holds, and you manage to pilot it to a safe landing. Even though normal roads are not meant for planes, they're still straight pieces of asphalt, just like you'd find in an airfield. So, in an emergency, they make a perfect runway. This has even become a common practice in some parts of the world. In Australia, an entire air ambulance unit often lands on the local roads. The pilots need to be taught how to do this so they can get to the remote corners of the country in case of an emergency. In the outback, this is often vital for anyone unlucky enough to find themselves on the wrong side of the country's wildlife. Australia has 100 species of venomous snakes and 10,000 species of venomous spiders, so this is more common than you might expect. When someone gets bitten in the wilderness, the rescue planes need to land somewhere nearby. They can't land on the soft, sandy ground because the planes are far too heavy. That only leaves the roads. This is such a problem for them that the people in Australia designed special roads for landing planes. They look like normal roads for cars, but with aviation markings to help the pilots land. There are also small pockets on the sides of the runway for aircraft parking. If you drove down one of these roads, you'd see special signs warning you that an airplane could suddenly appear. Luckily, there isn't much traffic in the outback, so cars and planes rarely meet each other. The only problem with landing in places this deserted is the lack of illumination. It's hard for the pilot to find a landing strip in the dark. In 2015, near South Florida, a pilot was flying a Piper PA-24 Comanche light engine airplane. He was cleared to land at one of the airports, but the landing was delayed. He was forced to circle around the airport for so long that he ran out of fuel. The places he saw that were close enough to land on were a swamp, which was a terrible option, and a highway. It was 8:45 a.m., rush hour. But still, the pilot steered the plane toward the busy road. The plane's engine wasn't running, so it flew silently towards the unsuspecting commuters. Most of them wouldn't have noticed it until it was only a few feet away. The pilot desperately tried to avoid highway signs, streetlights, and power lines. He was gradually losing altitude, and it was time to land. The pilot tried to warn the drivers of his approach, but it was no use. One of the drivers, Daniel, was relaxing on his drive to work. He nodded along to his favorite song and thought about what he was going to eat for lunch. Suddenly, the whole car shook. He looked behind him to see the roof of his car being sliced into pieces by a giant propeller. The screeching noise of the tearing metal and fear almost caused Daniel to lose control, but he kept his hands firmly on the wheel and hoped the propeller wouldn't reach him. Seconds later, the plane slowed to a stop. Amazingly, no one was hurt in the incident, and even the plane sustained almost no damage. It's a shame that the same couldn't be said for Daniel's car. Daniel had always been a cautious driver, and this was his first accident, ironically, with an airplane. It was such a stressful flight for the plane's pilot that while police and rescue workers were figuring out how to get the plane out of the way, he just laid down on its wing and took a nap. Another incident happened in California. The plane's engine failed right in the air. Once again, the highway was chosen as the landing spot. This time, the oncoming traffic lanes were separated by a green strip of lawn, and the pilot skillfully landed on it. There was no damage to the cars, the plane, or the pilot himself. Planes landing on the road are pretty common in some parts of America. Cantwell, Alaska has such a small population that the roads are mostly empty, so planes often use the highway alongside the cars. People come to the grocery store and see planes in the parking lot. Light planes don't weigh much more than a couple of cars, so the asphalt can easily carry them. They can also easily fit in the bounds of the road. Once planes reach a certain size, that becomes impossible. Take the small commercial Boeing 737, for example. Its wingspan of around 110 feet is double the width of even the biggest four-lane roads, which tend to measure in at about 60 feet. If one of these planes had to land on a road, its wings would smash into signs and lampposts. In an emergency, these issues might not be enough to stop pilots from landing on roads. The real problem with larger planes landing on normal roads is that they haven't been designed to carry the plane's weight. Commercial aircraft can weigh more than 90 tons, but roads never have to carry anything heavier than a truck. Now imagine a heavy Boeing trying to land on regular asphalt. As soon as it touches the ground, the wheels would plow straight through the surface, like skis through the snow. The plane's landing gear would get stuck in the ground, and the entire plane might even flip over. So, commercial pilots would definitely look for another place to land. Even though it might sound counterintuitive, one of the better landing options for huge commercial planes is water. There have been a few cases of emergency water landings, but the most famous was the Miracle on the Hudson. In 2009, an Airbus A320 took off from New York City and was on its way to Seattle. But 90 seconds after takeoff, it collided with a flock of Canada geese. They hit both of the plane's engines, and seconds later, the turbines stopped working. Rescue vessels arrived and rescued all the passengers. None of the people were hurt or even seriously injured.
This could have been one of the biggest disasters in aviation history. It was close to midnight at San Francisco International Airport when Air Canada Flight 759 approached for landing. The pilots were almost done for that day and thought they'd land as usual, but they were unaware that the airport looked different that night. Runway 28 right was open, while runway 28 left, usually parallel, was closed for maintenance, with its lights turned off. Despite having landed here before, the pilots made a critical error. Expecting to see two parallel runways, they mistook the center runway for the darkened 28 left and assumed the taxiway on the right was 28 right. What the crew didn't realize was that the taxiway wasn't empty. 4 planes were lined up there, waiting for takeoff, with more than 1,000 passengers in total, and their plane was headed straight toward them. There was a notice to airmen, which listed important details for flights, including this critical information. But these notices are long and dense, often stretching several pages, and the closure detail had been missed by the Air Canada crew. That night, the pilots were conducting a visual approach, relying on what they could see to align with the runway. This is normal in good weather, but is much harder at night. The crew had flown from Toronto and were tired after a long day. Their internal clocks were already past 3 a.m., and Canadian rules regarding pilot rest were less strict than those in the U.S. The captain had been working for nearly 19 hours without proper rest. As the plane got closer to danger, no one in the cockpit noticed they were on the wrong path. Planes approaching San Francisco often come in at a slight angle to reduce noise over the bay. It's normal for them to appear slightly off to air traffic controllers. But this added to the confusion, and the Air Canada crew kept heading toward the taxiway. When the pilots finally realized that something was off, they radioed the control tower to confirm their landing clearance. The controller, who was managing both air traffic and ground operations due to the late hour, took several seconds to respond. He cleared them to land, unaware that the plane was lined up for the wrong path. Meanwhile, the crew of one of the planes on the runway quickly radioed the tower, alerting them to the imminent danger. The tower immediately instructed the Air Canada crew to stop and go around for another attempt. The Air Canada pilots pulled up just in time, missing the parked planes by just a couple feet. The pilots, still shaken from the near miss, saved hundreds of lives. After the incident, a full investigation was conducted. Now, there are new safety measures, but there are still concerns about whether the lessons learned are enough. Recent years have seen an alarming rise in such awful close calls. Qantas Flight 32, a scheduled flight from London to Sydney via Singapore, encountered a critical emergency on November 4, 2010. Just minutes after taking off from Singapore's Changi Airport, as an Airbus A380 was flying over the Riau Islands in Indonesia, it encountered a serious problem. One of its 4 engines underwent an uncontained failure. For the next 2 hours, the crew faced a tense and difficult situation as they tried to figure out how badly the plane was damaged. The accident happened at 10:01 a.m. Singapore time. When the engine went off, pieces of it flew into the wing, damaging important systems. The fuel system was hit, causing leaks and even starting a fire in one of the fuel tanks. It also took out one of the plane's hydraulic systems, which help control things like the flaps and landing gear. It disabled the anti-lock brakes, which are crucial for safe landings. 2 of the other engines started to lose power as well, and the flaps, which help control the plane's descent and speed, were damaged. Despite the harm to the aircraft, the crew realized it was still controllable. They decided to circle near Singapore for about 50 minutes while they carefully checked the condition of the aircraft. The first officer and the supervising captain then used a special landing calculator to see if they could land safely at Changi, even though the plane was 50 tons heavier than its maximum landing weight. At first, the system couldn't give them a landing distance, but after adjusting for the fact that the runway was dry, it showed they could land with only 328 feet of runway left to spare. At 11:45 a.m., the plane landed safely at Changi Airport, but because it was going about 40 miles per hour faster than usual, 4 of its tires blew out when it touched down. After landing, the crew ran into another problem. They couldn't shut off the number 1 engine. Emergency crews had to step in and put out the engine themselves. The crew had to decide whether to evacuate the plane right away because fuel was leaking near the overheated brakes, which could have caused a fire. Captain David Evans later explained that, despite the risk, it was actually safer to keep everyone on board until things settled down. The cabin crew stayed on high alert, ready to evacuate passengers immediately if the situation got worse. To make things even tougher, the plane was running on battery power, which meant they could only use 1 radio to communicate with emergency services. Luckily, the danger passed, and everyone was able to leave the plane calmly using a set of stairs. Everyone on board, 440 passengers and 29 crew members, got out safely. On the ground in Batam, some debris from the engine fell on a school, houses, and a car, but thankfully, everyone was okay there as well. Just a few missteps could have made that situation turn out very differently, but luckily the crew handled it like heroes. Investigators eventually found that the problem started because a small oil pipe in the engine had been poorly made, leading to the disaster. This was the first time an engine failure like this had happened on an A380. It was, and still is, the world's largest passenger plane at the time. As a result, Qantas and some other airlines temporarily grounded all of its A380 planes to ensure they were safe. Another similar incident happened with Northwest Airlines Flight 85 in 2002. The plane took off from Detroit Metropolitan Airport at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There were 4 pilots on board. About 7 hours into the flight, flying at 35,000 feet, an unexpected issue struck. The plane veered sharply, banking to the left. The pilots initially thought an engine had failed. The senior captain quickly returned to the cockpit and took manual control. An emergency was declared, and they decided to divert the flight to Anchorage. It was hard to communicate, as they were in a zone with weak signals. Eventually, they connected with another Northwest Airlines flight nearby, which relayed their emergency call to Alaska. The situation was so unusual that none of the usual emergency procedures worked. The flight crew called Northwest Airlines headquarters in Minneapolis for help, but even they couldn't find a solution. Thankfully, the pilots worked together to control the plane. They managed to steer the plane using the ailerons, and by applying more power to one engine than the other. This tricky maneuver allowed them to land safely at Anchorage. After the incident, the NTSB and Boeing investigated once again. The NTSB investigator described it as a dramatic event that required careful examination. They found a crack in the power control module for the rudder, which had caused part of its metal housing to break. This break was unusual because it affected the module's outer casing, not just the inside parts. The NTSB concluded that the crack led to what's known as a rudder hardover, where the rudder is pushed to its maximum position and stays there, causing the sudden dangerous turn. All of these horrible situations show how fatigue, miscommunication, and outdated procedures can lead to disasters. But the sheer number of them in history, especially in U.S. airports, raises the question of whether enough lessons have truly been learned.
Okay, shocker. Airplanes don't take off with the wind, but actually against it. I'd think that if you take off with the wind, it pushes you forwards and helps you fly faster, but this is wrong. So I did some digging for us. We should think of an airplane as a kind of kite. To make a kite fly, you launch it against the wind, and so it flies. Here's how it works. There are 4 forces of flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. The lifting force is generated because of the differences above and below the kite. Above the kite, the speed of air is higher than below it. So, the pressure below is higher than that of the pressure above, and the kite is pushed forwards. This is the lifting force. There's also an opposing force, the force generated by gravitation that pushes the object down. That one is called weight. The thrust is the force that pushes the object forward. In the case of a kite, it's generated by the string, the wind, and the forward motion you're making. In the case of an airplane, the thrust force is generated by the engines. Finally, drag is the opposing force of thrust. So, to launch a kite into the air, the lifting force must be greater than that of the force of weight. Then, to stay in the air, all 4 must stay in balance. Lift must be equal to weight, thrust must be equal to drag. The moment the plane takes off, going against the wind helps to generate the needed lifting force faster. Yes, going against the wind does decrease the ground speed of an aircraft, but that's not the speed we need. An airplane flies due to the speed of air flowing over the wings. This airflow isn't generated by the plane's engines, but by the wind. and the higher the airflow, the higher the lift. Going against the wind increases the flow of air over the aircraft's wings, giving it an additional lift and allowing it to achieve a higher altitude in less time because it takes off at a greater angle. The same works for landing. Landing against the wind lets a pilot to descend at a shorter distance in a shorter time. The airflow and the lifting force are the things that are responsible for turbulence. The direction and speed of the wind, and therefore the airflow, isn't constant over time. Sometimes it changes pretty quickly, like 100 times per second. So one moment there's more lift, and the other moment there's less lift, and then the plane is shaking. This is called the turbulence zone. It's not dangerous at all, it just means that you fly through the zone of a highly constant wind, and that's all. So if a pilot is given the option of how to take off, they'd pick to take off into the wind. It's not always the case, and it's not a problem taking off with the wind, but going into it helps a lot. Many airports are designed so that most runways are taking the direction opposing the most typical wind direction of the area. Also, taking off and landing are the most dangerous stages of any flight. That's because the pilot has less time and space to react to any occurring problems. In the air, even if both engines stopped working, a plane won't just start falling. Instead, it'll start gliding through the sky, losing about 1 mile of altitude for every 10 of them going forward. So, the pilot will have about 8 minutes to react and find a safe place to land. During takeoff and landing, the time is limited. If an engine fails, the pilot will have seconds to decide if they should still take off and deal with the problems in the air or cancel the flight. The thing is that canceling isn't even always possible, even if something happens. If the plane has already reached a speed of 100 miles per hour, it can't possibly be stopped before the runway ends. Physics. And getting out of the runway isn't good. Flying is costly, so not only the passengers, but the airline as well wants to make the flight as fast and short as possible. So there's no surprise here, there's always the most efficient way to go from point A to point B. And the shortest way is, of course, a straight line. Now look at some aircraft routes. These don't exactly look straight, but don't let this trick you. We have to keep in mind that the Earth isn't flat like we see on a map, it's a sphere. So these lines only appear like arcs when we project them on a map. In reality, they're pretty much straight. If there's an efficient way, this means that every airline and every plane wants to fly this way. But there are hundreds of planes going from North America to Europe every day, and many go at the same time. Turns out, the air highway is pretty busy. So how come the planes never collide? That's because before a flight starts, the crew make a strict flight plan that is uploaded to the aircraft's computer, and that pilot will have to follow. To be completely honest, there are several of them, just to have options if something goes wrong. What helps to avoid any colliding is that the airspace is three-dimensional, and the planes don't only fly in several lines as cars, but also at different altitudes. Air traffic is managed by dispatchers who watch for planes and control that they don't get closer to each other than 3 miles. There's also flight level regulations. All the westbound flights fly at even-numbered altitudes, like for example 34,000 feet or 36,000 feet, and all eastbound flights fly at odd-number altitudes, like 35,000 feet and 37,000 feet. This means that there's a couple of thousand feet between the planes flying in the same direction. To share the sky safely, each aircraft has to follow their own airway that even has a specific name. There are also some parts of the air that are especially busy, having remarkably high traffic because many planes fly there every minute. So, whenever an aircraft enters a busy zone, it has to stick to a very specific route. So, usually, commercial aircrafts fly on the altitude between 31,000 and 38,000 feet. This altitude is reached within the first 10 minutes of the flight. So, why so high? With height, the air gets thinner, so the plane faces less resistance and can fly faster and burn less fuel. Another reason that they fly so high is that the plane avoids most of the weather patterns that usually happen way lower. High winds and rain happen in the troposphere, the atmospheric layer that is closest to the ground. Planes fly just a little bit above, but already in the next layer, the stratosphere. Since most of the weather phenomenon are avoided, the flight is smoother and there's less turbulence. But then why don't they fly even higher? Remember the force of weight that pushes the object down. An aircraft is very heavy, and the more you weigh, the harder it is to get higher, because the force is stronger. To push it even higher, more fuel will be needed, and that's inefficient. Also, the oxygen becomes too sparse to fuel the engines, so the planes usually fly the most efficient way, high enough to avoid the weather patterns, but not much higher so that they don't spend too much fuel. If you've ever flown, you've probably noticed those little holes on the windows. An airplane window has 3 panes of plexiglass. That tiny hole is only in the one that's in the middle. It exists to regulate the huge pressure difference inside and outside the cabin. This way, the outer plane can handle the load. If the outer pane breaks, the middle one will keep the window intact. Also, that hole also keeps the windows from fogging up. Have you noticed that whenever you enter the plane, you enter it from the left side? It's not random. Firstly, the captain usually sits on the left side of the airplane cabin, so it's easier for the captain to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge from that side. Also, the aircraft is fueled and loaded with the baggage on the right side. With passengers loading the plane from the left side, the crew can do their job undisturbed.
They make plane wings smooth to let air flow easily around their surface and reduce resistance during the flight. So why did they add these convex yellow hooks? They obviously worsen the aerodynamics. Yeah, they do, but they're also necessary for your safety. Imagine a plane making an emergency landing in the open sea. Everything's going well. The aircraft is sliding on the water. Then rescue boats sail to this place to evacuate the passengers. They leave the plane through emergency exits located above the wings. Before the door opens, the escape slide inflates. Passengers need to walk on the wing and go down the slide. But the wing surface is slippery because of water. They might fall and get hurt. To prevent this, the stewards install a rescue rope. They attach one end to the door and the other to the edge of the wing, passing it through these hooks. During the evacuation, people hold on to this cable like a railing and don't fall. They can also attach rescue boats to the wing with a rope and these hooks, so the sea won't take people far away from the plane. By the way, the plane can stay on the water for 10 minutes to 60 hours, depending on the model, weather conditions, and the pilot's skills. Both the main and emergency exits have extra handles for crew members. During an evacuation, people may panic and accidentally push the flight attendants off their feet. To avoid a fall, they hold onto these handles. A seat belt on an airplane has a slightly different purpose from that in your car. The one in the vehicle protects you from a horizontal hit. When a plane is going through turbulence, it's shaking up and down. Your waist belt keeps you from hitting the ceiling. Crew members have handcuffs for problem passengers. If someone behaves badly and interferes with the flight attendants have the right to chain them to their seats. To do this, they use police handcuffs or plastic ties. This is the maximum that can be done during the flight. Then they report a rowdy person to the airport and hand them over to the police after landing. During an emergency, oxygen masks drop automatically. They have an extra purpose you might not know about: to equalize the pressure and prevent panic. Air pressure can change because of turbulence. So, among other things, the masks help passengers stay calm. Your seat is your safe haven. That life jacket under it won't let you drown. Also, the seat's surface is made of waterproof material. If water gets into the cabin, the seat will save you from freezing, since it won't get wet. It's also fireproof. The cover can prevent the fire from spreading through the cabin. But more importantly, it can save you from the flames. Of course, you'll most likely never have to use this feature, but it's nice to feel safe, isn't it? You can use the tray table in the seat in front of you like a hammock. Just tie a belt, a blanket, or a towel around the table and stretch your feet out. You might have noticed black triangles on the wall above the seats. For you, as a passenger, they may indicate the seats that have the best view of the wings, where you can take the most beautiful flight photos. But the triangles weren't created for your camera. The crew members monitor the condition of the aircraft through windows under these signs. Suppose the wings freeze, the engine catches fire, or the pilot receives a signal about some problem. In that case, the crew will quickly move to the triangles and assess the situation. And there you are, sitting under the triangle, looking at the wing and thinking, why are the wings located in the lower part of the plane? They could install them above the windows or right in the center. Actually, some planes have them in the middle and higher up, and each location makes sense. The engine and turbines are under the wings. It's much easier to repair them since they're close to the ground. And in case of an emergency landing in the sea, the wings act as a rescue cushion. They help to keep the plane on the water. Empty fuel tanks under the wing can also help the plane stay on the surface. But this position has certain risks. Debris can get into the turbines on the runway. Fortunately, this is unlikely to happen since they carefully clean it. Planes with wings in the middle get the least air resistance. That's why they build fighter jets and supersonic aircraft this way. Big cargo planes have wings in the upper part of the hull. Thanks to it, the aircraft stays close to the ground. It makes it easier to load cargo. Also, it's safer to land on unprepared runways with high wings, since debris won't get into the turbines. The aerodynamics of these planes works better thanks to such wings. They get less air resistance and deliver cargo faster. Oxygen inside the masks is a combination of chemicals. The transportation of oxygen tanks is too expensive for the airline. They take up a lot of space and increase weight, which leads to extra fuel consumption. Therefore, they use a chemical oxygen generator. It's located in the panel above your head. There's a small tank with barium, sodium, and potassium compounds. They mix and create a hot chemical reaction that releases oxygen and passes it into the mask. Small holes in windows save the glass from breaking. The air pressure inside the aircraft is much stronger than that outside. The difference is so big that the air can just break the glass from the other side. To prevent this, they drill small holes. The air penetrates there and reduces the load on the window. By the way, they have a round shape for the same reason. It's ideal for an equal distribution of air. If they were square or triangular, air streams with moisture would accumulate in the corners. It would lead to destruction. Plus, all water gets dried out thanks to the hole. Windows are made of triple glass. The outer glass takes the pressure. The middle one works like a fuse. The third layer protects the second one from passengers who like to touch it. Technically, the plane could fly with one layer, but it would be dangerous. They also installed extra protection for the wheels. They experience huge loads during landing, but don't worry, they won't burst. The tires can withstand pressure 5 to 7 times bigger than they actually get. See the toilet sign on the door? There's a secret latch under it. Crew members can unlock the door from the outside, so don't expect complete privacy. Of course, it's prohibited for other passengers to do that. The cabin crew can open it in case of emergencies. When flight attendants pass through the cabin during the flight, they always touch the upper shelves above the seats. They don't check if the luggage compartments are closed. Along the bottom of these compartments, there are handles in the form of jagged edges. Flight attendants hold on to them not to fall. It's a pretty convenient thing, especially for those who don't like touching the seats with sitting passengers on the way to the toilet. There's an important reason why they install turbines under the wings. Previously, they put them in the plane's tail to improve the aerodynamics of the flight. If one of the engines stopped working, the cabin wouldn't shake so much. Yes, planes can fly with one turbine running. Also, the wings were thinner and streamlined thanks to turbines in the tail, which was also good for aerodynamics. But it turned out that such a location meant additional costs. The engine in the tail was inconvenient to maintain. They used to place it high, so people needed special equipment and extra time to service it. And of course, it affected the ticket price. They started to install turbines under the wings to save money and time. Have you ever noticed the flashing light in the cabin before takeoff? This happens when the pilot disconnects a plane from the airport power supply and switches to the onboard one. This rapid transition may cause flashing.
Each airplane carrying over 19 passengers must have a crash axe. You will see it installed as a firefighting device. That way, if there's an electrical fire, crew members can cut away the cockpit or some other panels.
The pilots can actually break the windscreen if something bad happens and people need to evacuate. Passenger planes are mostly white to protect them from solar radiation and its effects. Aircrafts need to remain cool at airports in particularly hot countries, while passengers are going in or out. Brilliant white paint can bounce the sunlight back. It also protects some parts of the plane that are made of composite materials and prevents their damage since there's higher ultraviolet radiation at high altitudes. Commercial planes must get to speeds of at least 155 miles per hour to achieve stability and safety at takeoff. Some smaller planes can sustain altitude even at speeds of 30 miles per hour. But when speeds are that low, the plane can easily get destabilized and could even fail the takeoff. The white trails that planes leave behind, also known as contrails, are created because of water vapor. Vapor is produced during the combustion of fuel in plane engines. When the plane reaches its cruising altitude of 32,800 feet, temperatures get quite low, about -67 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really cold. So, the water turns into particles of ice. How long these particles are going to remain visible mostly depends on humidity. The higher the level of humidity is, the bigger those trails get and remain visible even long after the plane has disappeared. Airplanes all over the globe get struck by lightning almost on a daily basis. A regular airplane in commercial service gets hit on average once a year. How often it happens depends on a couple of things. First, how many landings and takeoffs the plane performs, since lightning mostly strikes at heights between 5,000 and 15,000 feet. It also depends on location. For instance, it's more likely for a plane to get struck by lightning around the equator and in some other parts of the world. Modern planes are designed to withstand such strikes. They have to go through special lightning tests to prove they can cope with strikes. Planes mostly fly at altitudes of up to 7 miles. There are some benefits like the thinner air or producing less aerodynamic drag, which also means less fuel consumption. The temperatures up there are lower, which makes the jet engines more efficient. That part of the atmosphere is also less turbulent, which helps make flights smoother. Some planes have already gone into space, but not the ones you see at the airport. Those classical planes need air to go up, and space is basically just a vacuum. The first plane that reached space was designed around 70 years ago. During its first flight, it generated lift and stability using its thin, stubby wings. It traveled more than 5 times the speed of sound. There are at least 1 sextillion planets out there in our universe. To give you an idea of how huge this number is, our planet weighs almost 1 sextillion times more than some animals like a bear. None of these planets are cubic, triangular, or any other shape. They're all round. At its beginnings, a planet is just a cloud of dust and rocks that rotates around a central star. Dust and small pieces attract each other because of gravity, and they keep doing it until they form a blob. Now, the blob starts attracting more matter. It grows and gets bigger until it's done with collecting everything in its path. Gravitational forces work equally in all directions, so that blob gets a round shape. But not the perfect one. Our planet, for instance, is almost a sphere, but with a bulge in the middle. The bulge is there because the Earth is spinning. Every time it rotates on its axis, the middle part travels further than the top. The area at the equator is moving quicker than the area at the poles. And the faster you spin something, the more you'll throw it outwards. Sound will travel 4 times faster in water than in air. It's a wave, and that's why it moves faster in a denser substance. Particles that are close to each other, as in denser substances, will bump into each other more easily. Water is denser. There are 800 times more particles in a bottle of water than in the same sized bottle filled with air. Bubbles are round because they occur in a thin film, such as one of soapy water traps air. The molecules in the film attract each other. That way, they stick together and also shape a sphere.
because that's the smallest possible area that encloses any given volume. They can't get any smaller because they have trapped air inside. You can turn your pencil into a diamond. If you apply a temperature of 2,550 degrees Fahrenheit and pressure of 55,000 atmospheres, you can transform graphite into diamond. There are actually two variations of a single chemical element, carbon. Diamonds aren't just used in jewelry, but for different purposes, for example, as a cutting tool for electronic devices. Beavers are amazing builders capable of creating cool and complex riverside structures. They build them to protect themselves from wild animals that might go after them, like wolves or bears. But not in the way it may look at first. Beavers don't really live in their dams. They only use them as a barrier, making some sort of a pool or pond of deeper water. That's where their real home is, in the pool. It's like a small island or dome lodge. It's a dry area where beavers are safe. They can also store their food there. These pools are deep enough for land animals to avoid them. Beavers dig underwater tunnels that are entrances into their home. If a predator or some other danger is coming, they can quickly escape to safety. Some animals sleep while standing. Zebras, elephants, horses, some birds like flamingos. Cows can sleep while standing, but they prefer to lie down when they want to rest. To sleep while standing, animals need to have legs that can align vertically. That way, they don't have to activate their muscles to keep them standing. Their knees also lock in place. It's better for these animals to sleep while standing because they'd probably be too slow to react if there was a predator going after them. When we laugh in some unpleasant situations, or when we feel nervous, we're actually trying to mask our true emotions. For example, you do something embarrassing and try to cover up the shame you feel. Also, we're more relaxed after laughing, so if you're nervously chuckling in an unpleasant situation, it can help you clear some of your negative emotions. When you buy a bottle of water, you can see it has an expiration date. It's not that the water inside will turn bad. The expiration date is there because the plastic may start to leach into the water over time and contaminate it with chemicals that might be bad for us. The moon has its own time zone. The astronomers created a special watch for all moonwalkers. It measures time in lunations, which is the period of time the moon needs to rotate and revolve around our planet. Each lunation is almost 30,000 Earth days. You can decaffeinate your coffee if you take it into a sauna to moisten the green coffee bean within temperatures of 160 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. The point is to get 10 milligrams or less of caffeine per one coffee. That's when you can put it in the decaf category. One serving of regular coffee has 50 to 75 milligrams of caffeine. There's a reason the Earth spins. Our solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago. There was a raging cloud of dust and gas. Molecules and atoms in that cloud had a tendency to rotate in a certain direction. That same cloud collapsed under gravitational forces. Gravity magnified its initial rotation and then flattened it out into a disk. Our planet formed within that disk, and now it's spinning because of that old pattern of its parent cloud.
Have you ever watched an action-packed Hollywood film where an airplane gets a hole in its side and everyone starts freaking out? Stuff starts flying all over the place and people are barely staying in their seats. Well, in real life, a small hole in the plane's body isn't going to cause that much drama. However, I have an incredible story to tell you about a pilot who actually managed to land a plane with half of its roof missing. Can you believe it? Make sure your seatbelt is fastened because this one is going to be a wild ride. On April 28, 1988, a Boeing 737 owned by Aloha Airlines took off from Hilo International Airport en route to Honolulu. Before this flight, the plane had already flown 3 short trips from Honolulu to Hilo, Maui, and Kauai. Everything was chill that day, and the weather was nice and calm. It looked like smooth sailing all the way. The captain of the flight was Robert Schornsteimer, and the co-pilot was Madeline Tompkins, both experienced pilots with thousands of flight hours in the Boeing 737. Bright and early that morning, before taking off from Honolulu, Madeline did the regular pre-flight inspection and said that everything was good to go. At 11 a.m., they took off from Honolulu and went to Maui, then Hilo. When they got to Hilo, they didn't leave the cockpit or check the plane from the outside. It wasn't a requirement, so why bother? At 1:25 p.m., the plane took off for the final leg of the round trip, with 95 people on board. 89 passengers, 2 pilots, 3 flight attendants, and an FAA traffic controller who sat in the observer seat in the cockpit. The plane had taken off like normal and reached its cruising altitude of 24,000 feet without any hiccups. But then, 26 miles from Kahului, things went totally haywire. The pilots heard a loud whooshing sound, followed by a crack, and then a rush of wind that was so loud it was deafening. Turns out, a small section of the roof on the left side had come loose, causing the plane to decompress explosively. And to make matters even worse, the decompression caused a chain reaction that led to a huge chunk of the plane's roof ripping off completely. That missing part was a massive 18.5 feet long and was part of the skin that covered the plane from the cockpit all the way back to the forewing area. The pilots didn't have a clue what was going on when the disaster struck. The first officer, who was the one in charge of the plane at that time, suddenly felt her head snap back, and then she saw a bunch of gray insulation and debris flying around the cockpit like it was a tornado. Meanwhile, the captain took a look around and was shocked to see that the cockpit door was nowhere to be seen, and instead of the first-class ceiling, he was staring straight up at the sky. The plane started to tilt from side to side, making it challenging to keep it under control. The crew in the cockpit quickly put on their oxygen masks, and the captain took over control of the plane. He then initiated an emergency descent towards the nearest airport on Maui Island. Luckily, all the passengers were seated, and most of them had their seatbelts fastened since the seatbelt sign was still on. Unfortunately, the 3 flight attendants were caught off guard. One of them was near the hole and was pulled out of the plane. The other 2 were thrown to the floor, with one of them hitting her head hard and losing consciousness. The third attendant tried to help the passengers and keep them calm. At the same time, the pilots were desperately trying to let air traffic control know that they were in trouble. But there were communication problems even between themselves due to the loud noise and the fact that they were wearing oxygen masks. They had to resort to hand signals to understand each other. Moreover, they were unsure whether their messages were being heard by ATC. The plane's controls were not responding properly, which made the captain's job of flying the plane even harder. The first officer was doing her best to assist the captain and communicate with the tower. It was only after the plane descended to an altitude of 14,000 feet that the controller finally received their distress call and immediately started making arrangements for an emergency landing. The control tower wasn't prepared for a situation like this, though. In fact, the tower had to call 911, just like any other regular person would do in case of an emergency. The problem was that the controller didn't understand the severity of the situation, and they didn't realize that the passengers and crew members would need medical help. This was because the crew had only reported a rapid decompression and hadn't explained the entire situation in detail. The plane was in a very bad mess, but the captain was doing everything he could to safely land the plane. As they descended towards the airport, the captain commanded the first officer to lower the landing gear, but the indicator light didn't turn on. The plane also had an issue with the left engine, which failed as they approached the runway. Despite these problems, the captain used the reverse thrust of the working engine to try and land the plane. It was a difficult and dangerous task, but they managed to land the plane safely on the runway. The passengers and crew members were then evacuated from the plane. It was a miracle that everyone survived. However, 65 people were injured. They had been hit by debris and pieces of the plane's body that were flying around. Unfortunately, the ground staff wasn't aware of the severity of the situation and didn't have enough resources to provide immediate medical assistance to the injured passengers. The first ambulance arrived 7 minutes after the plane landed, which wasn't an ideal scenario. Furthermore, there were only 2 ambulances on the entire island, which couldn't accommodate all the injured people. As a result, tour vans were used to transport the passengers to the hospital. Fortunately, 2 drivers who were former paramedics provided immediate first aid to the injured right on the runway. Meanwhile, the airport mechanics and office staff took the vans to the hospital, which was located 3 miles away. Despite the chaotic and stressful circumstances, only 8 people suffered severe injuries, but they all later made a full recovery. The plane was in really bad shape though, and it was no wonder it couldn't handle the stress of the decompression incident. Despite its age not being a problem, it had experienced a whole lot of takeoffs and landings, which took a toll on its integrity. The salty and humid environment it operated in only added to the damage. You see, planes are designed to withstand a certain number of flight cycles, and this plane had exceeded that number by a long shot. The majority of its flights were short domestic ones, which meant it had to take off and land way more times than it was designed for. This is what ultimately led to the roof coming off during the flight. The poor condition of the plane meant that it was beyond repair and had to be dismantled right there at the airport. What's interesting is that in an interview after the accident, one passenger recalled that she had noticed a crack in the plane's fuselage while she was boarding. She didn't tell the flight crew about it because she didn't think it was worth it, so they didn't know to check it. It's important to remember that these types of accidents are very rare nowadays. Major airlines and airports take numerous steps to ensure safety. And according to Harvard University, the chances of being in an airplane accident are about 1 in 1.2 million. That's a tiny percentage, and I don't know about you, but I find that very comforting. And even if something did happen, such as the roof of the plane coming off, it's reassuring to know that the pilots are trained to handle emergencies and can still land the plane safely.
February 2nd, 1970. We're at an Air Force base in Montana. Today, the 71st Fighter Interceptor Squadron plans to hold a training sortie. 4 pilots get into jet planes and take off. Shortly, one of the pilots accidentally activates the braking parachute. A fabric dome shoots out of the plane. It's filled with air and interrupts the flight of the aircraft. The pilot has to land. The other 3 pilots continue the training. They arrive at the designated place and begin to simulate an air fight. Every pilot is a professional in his field. They have undergone similar training many times. But something amazing is going to happen today. The pilot of one plane, Major Curtis, must fight with 2 other planes. One of the Major's opponents is Captain Faust. 2 planes are chasing the target. Major Curtis turns his jet and directs it straight upwards. The other 2 planes follow suit. The Major performs a maneuver, vertical rolling scissors. He flies up in a spiral while simultaneously making a barrel roll. Then he turns around and flies down, performing a dive. The pursuers are not far behind. Major Curtis makes another aerial maneuver. He goes to the side and flies past Captain Faust. At this moment, the captain's plane begins to shake. Its front part lowers, and the jet hurtles to the ground at great speed. Captain Faust can't do anything. The plane doesn't listen to him. The control stick doesn't work. The engine's breaking down. The captain activates the braking parachute, but that doesn't work either. The plane is getting closer and closer to the ground. It can no longer be saved. Now it's important to save at least Captain Faust's life. He ejects and opens the parachute. Suddenly, the abandoned plane starts to fly straight. The flaps on the wings are activated, and it stops falling down. The plane without a pilot flies and slowly descends. It goes at a speed of 200 miles per hour and disappears from sight behind the cliffs. Captain Faust lands safely on a snow-covered field. The other pilots see this and are afraid the plane will fall in a nearby town. They immediately head in that direction. At the time, the unguided aircraft descends, touches the ground, and slides along the field. Next, it makes a 20-degree turn and breaks through a small fence. The plane stops at a farmer's field. The owner of the farm calls the local sheriff. The sheriff arrives and calls the nearest military base to report what happened. He approaches the fallen plane to assess the damage and turn off the humming engine. But as soon as he gets closer, the plane begins to hum and shake as if it wants to escape from there. The plane owners arrive. They are surprised because the plane is in almost perfect condition. They deliver it back to the base, repair it, and return it to service. In 2016 in Belgium, a train was traveling without a driver. That day, people at 2 railway stations saw a train slowly moving between them. It didn't make any stops, brake, or accelerate. It was just slowly riding onwards. Passengers couldn't contact the driver and get out of the vehicle because no one was controlling the train at the time. Panic was rising. People began to say that a ghost train without a driver appeared. But the truth turned out to be not so mysterious. The empty passenger train had been leaving the station according to the schedule when the driver noticed some kind of malfunction. He stopped the train and got out of the cabin to see what happened. But for some reason, the train started again by itself, and the driver didn't have time to jump on it. Fortunately, everything ended well. The driver warned all his colleagues about the runaway train. Everyone was evacuated from the train stations. Then, at some station, one brave driver jumped into the cabin right on the move and stopped the stray train. Speaking of ghost trains, you can see such things in the UK. They pass through railway stations that have long been abandoned. If you get on such a train, you'll probably be the only passenger. Authorities let these trains drive because it's economically profitable for the country. To cancel the route of a ghost train, you need to go through a lot of bureaucratic procedures and spend tons of extra money. So, they travel all over the country and don't bother anyone. Now we go to the ocean to learn about the ship that was drifting for several months without its captain. The ship's called Alta. It was bought by a new owner in 2017 and marked with the flag of Tanzania. Almost all cargo ships are equipped with AIS, Automatic Identification System. That's a navigation system that works on the principle of GPS. All vessels are equipped with AIS, so their movement in the ocean can be tracked. This feature was disabled for the Alta. The ship disappeared from the satellite's eyes and reappeared several times. In 2017, it sailed by Greek port cities. The Alta made 12 stops in 3 such towns in different parts of Greece. Then the AIS signal disappeared. 10 months later, the Alta appeared again on the northern coast of Africa. In September 2018, it was headed to Haiti. During this trip, the ship's engine failed. The nearest shore was far away. The ship began to drift. A few days passed. The crew couldn't repair the vessel. The food supply was almost out. The situation was getting worse as a strong hurricane was approaching the place where the ship broke down. Fortunately, a rescue boat came to the sailors. They were all evacuated shortly before the hurricane hit. The Alta stayed drifting in the ocean. After a while, another ship came to tow it to the coast of Guyana. But something went wrong. Somebody stole the Alta. It's unknown who did it and why. Then, almost 1 year passed. In the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a British Navy ship notices the drifting Alta. There's no one on board. No one controls it. Then, almost 6 months later, a resident of a small town in Ireland sees the abandoned ship off the coast. Somehow, the Alta was able to cover the distance across the Atlantic and wash up on the coast of Ireland. The Irish authorities said it had been a miracle that no one else saw the ship. It sailed calmly for such a long distance, surviving storms. They started an investigation to establish the owner of the vessel. It's important to find a responsible person who will tow off the Alta. It's extremely difficult to do so, though. They didn't find the owner. One day, an unknown person called the Irish authorities and introduced themselves as the proprietor of the Alta, but didn't provide any evidence. But the record for the longest drifting vessel along the ocean belongs to the SS Bechimo. People were seeing this ghost ship at different times for 38 years. It was a merchant ship owned by a Canadian trading company. In 1931, the ship got blocked by ice off the coast of Alaska. A strong snowstorm began. The crew waited a week for the bad weather to end, but the storm only intensified. One day, when the storm subsided a bit, part of the crew went to the nearest town. The rest of the crew members and the captain set up camp near the vessel. The storm didn't stop for a long time. The blizzard was so strong that people couldn't see beyond their stretched hands. Finally, when the storm was over, the captain went to find the ship. And couldn't. He decided it sank during the snowfall. A week later, the ship was found, drifting near the place where it was lost. Its hull was damaged so badly that it was unsafe to sail on it. The captain decided to abandon the vessel. However, it didn't sink. For the next 38 years, it was seen drifting at various points along the coast of Alaska. The last time people saw the frozen ship stuck in the ice was in 1969. In 2006, a special project was created to find SS Bechimo. However, in all these years, they've found nothing. Its fate is still unknown. It's likely the ship found peace on the seabed of the Chukchi Sea.
Piano parlor at 35,000 feet. You won't believe you're on an airplane. That could have been the slogan of American Airlines. They pulled 50 seats out of each Boeing 747 and used the space to create a passenger lounge with armchairs, cocktail tables, and even a Wurlitzer electric piano. Their passengers could sing their favorite songs to the tickled ivories during long flights across the country. Luxury in economy. In the early 1980s, Continental Airlines installed so-called Polynesian pubs in some of its DC-10 jets. It was a small bar with snacks and drinks, round tables, and swivel chairs. There was also a video Pong console. Continental took an approach worth appreciating. This kind of luxury was for economy-class passengers. Now imagine what first class was getting. Fine dining and flying. Australia's largest airline, Qantas, boasted a luxurious Captain Cook first-class lounge. The company turned the 747's upper deck into a full-on restaurant. It had it all: good food, good drinks, and good company. Flowers to prove a point. Pan American World Airways advertised the 707 Clipper as a machine without vibration. They put fresh flowers in a vase on each table to show passengers that the water wouldn't spill right on their laps during the flight. Pan Am featured freshly cut flowers until the late 1970s. Slightly questionable if turbulence struck, but still romantic. Full-sized beds. During the 1940s, everyone enjoyed the privilege of sleeping comfortably during a flight. On the Boeing Stratocruiser, seats were roomy and could be turned into a full-on bed. The aircraft even had spacious locker rooms where passengers could change into their PJs or into a different outfit. Ooh, how the times have changed. Wacky colors. Until the mid-60s, airplanes were painted in light colors, or not at all. The only bright spot was usually a colored strip along the fuselage. But not American airline Braniff International. They hired a famous architect and interior designer, Alexander Girard, to make their planes brighter. He used a vibrant palette that includes such shades as purple metallic and lemon yellow. But why dabble in bizarre paint jobs when you can make wacky planes, like the Flying Barrel? Officially called the Stipa Caproni, it was one of the funniest planes in aviation history. Italian engineer Luigi Stipa designed the thing to have its propeller inside the bulky barrel-like fuselage. The bizarre-looking plane actually proved to be quiet and stable in flight. The only drawback was the speed. It couldn't go much faster than 80 miles per hour because of drag. That wasn't much, even for the 30s. 9-winged super boat plane. Well, what else can you call it? Officially, it was the Caproni CA-60. Yep, the same aircraft manufacturer that built Luigi Stipa's weird barrel design. If you're wondering whether this thing could really fly, the answer is not really. It had a brief maiden flight, but wasn't successful on its second attempt. Its dreams of soaring across the Atlantic went down with it. A wingless plane. Famous aeronautical engineer Alexander Lippisch contributed a lot to the study of aerodynamics. But man, did he make some weird aircraft. His Dornier Aerodyne was basically another flying barrel, only this one didn't have wings at all. It's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that, unfortunately, lost the popularity contest to helicopters. The Spruce Goose. Meet the largest flying boat ever built. Officially called the Hughes H-4 Hercules, the aircraft was nicknamed the Spruce Goose because of its birch frame. The plane was made from wood because of an aluminum shortage at the time. Its first flight was also its last. The wooden giant managed an altitude of 70 feet over the water, but landed after going a mere mile. The flying umbrella. In search of better performance and reliability, aeronautical engineer Paul Nemeth developed a round-wing plane. People who saw his Nemeth parasol aptly dubbed it the flying umbrella. Its strangely circular wing was set 16 feet wide, enough to set a Volkswagen Beetle on top. Though only one prototype of the Nemeth parasol was ever built, this plane entered the list of the weirdest aircraft design. The Flying Pancake. This delicious-sounding breakfast-inspired nickname belongs to the Vought V-173. It was an experimental vertical takeoff and landing plane. It was called a pancake because of its yellow disc-shaped body. This thing was pretty much wingless. Any lift generated was all thanks to that flat fuselage. An inflatable plane. In the 1950s, Goodyear created the inflatoplane. The idea was to use it as a rescue aircraft that could be rolled up and packed into a small container. I'm talking smaller than your average bed. It was made of fabric to make that possible and could be blown up to full size, all 20 feet of it, in only 5 minutes. But in 1972, the project was shut down because of its main drawback. The plane could be popped with a single pinprick. The Super Guppy. Try not to stare at his forehead. Go ahead. Nah, you can't not look at it. It's okay. The Aerospace Line Super Guppy is the only airplane that could fit an entire spaceship. And that's what mostly these models were made for, to transport NASA's rockets and their parts. So how did they load that massive cargo space? The plane's huge nose lifts up. NASA still uses one of these aircraft today. The Antonov AN-225. This monster of an airplane is quite the record holder. It can hold the most cargo with a maximum capacity of over 500,000 pounds, meaning this plane could transport your house somewhere if you're looking to relocate. It also has the longest wingspan, almost 300 feet. The Statue of Liberty could lie across it. Miniature aircraft. This plane is the exact opposite of the previous two. The McDonnell XF-85 Goblin was supposed to fit inside another plane. This aircraft made history as one of the smallest planes ever built. Because of its unusual shaped fuselage, the Goblin was nicknamed the Flying Egg. Unfortunately, it never made it past the prototype stage. The thing was too hard to control. Backward wings. When watching it in action, you'd think this plane was flying backwards. That's because the wings on the Grumman X-29 were angled in reverse. Strange as the design was, this plane had extraordinary maneuverability and a light structure. But of course, there was one major drawback. It was the most aerodynamically unstable aircraft ever built. The computerized flight control system had to make 40 corrections per second to provide some stability. Oops. The Chopper Cycle. The De Laughlin HZ-1 Aerocycle was an American single-pilot flying vehicle developed back in the 1950s. To turn left or right, they had to tilt the entire chopper in that direction, sort of like maneuvering a motorcycle. The Aerocycle could reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, and apparently pilots only needed 20 minutes of instruction to learn how to fly it. The Boomerang Plane. At first glance, the Rutan Model 202 Boomerang looks like two planes holding hands in the air. But it's actually just one fuselage. It houses one propeller, and the other is on a separate engine nearby. Thanks to its strange but efficient design, the plane could fly nearly straight at all speeds even if one of its engines failed. Its designer, engineer Burt Rutan, used his own brainchild for personal transportation. Invisible aircraft. The Northrop Tasset Blue, nicknamed the Whale, looked like anything but a plane. But sometimes stealth outweighs aerodynamic concerns. The goal of this experimental plane was to show that an aircraft can be virtually invisible to radars. Thanks to its strange shape, the Whale could operate very close to the front line without being detected. Combo Craft Airship. Although it looks like a typical airship, the technology in the Lockheed Martin P-791 is much more sophisticated. It was built to combine the high speed of a jet with the buoyancy of a Zeppelin. This is a very fuel-effective solution. Hybrid airships burn less than 1/10 the fuel of a helicopter per ton.